Good evening. We're going to get started momentarily. If anybody who wants to speak, there's green speaker cards on the front table here that need to be filled out and turned in. Like I said, we're just waiting for one more person to arrive, and then we'll get started. Good evening. The Planning Commission meeting of January 18th will come to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Secretary will call roll.
Commissioner Mayer. Commissioner Mann.
Here.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Rice.
Here.
Chairperson Tolson.
Here. The first item on my agenda is election of officers.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Tolson. This is the time and place set for the nomination and election of Planning Commission Chairperson and Vice Chairperson for 2023. The Simi Valley Municipal Code provides that prior to any vote for the office of Chairperson, the Deputy Director, City Planner, must take all nominations for the office of Chairperson. All nominations must receive a second. Anyone receiving a nomination may vote for themselves. The floor is now open for nominations for office of Chairperson.
I'd like to nominate
John Tolson.
Sorry.
I've got to learn how to work this. Nominating John Tolson.
Is that for chair?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
All seconded.
Okay, there's a second for John Tolson. Are there any other nominations? Okay, having received all nominations for the slate of chairperson, this includes John Tolson. The recording secretary will now poll the commission on their vote for the office of chairperson.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, congratulations. The chairperson for the Planning Commission for 2023 is John Tolson, and you could stay in your
Change
seat.
you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate that.
All right, so now we're going to take nominations for the slate for vice chairperson. Do we have any nominations for vice chairperson?
I nominate Vice Chair Rice, or Commissioner Rice as Vice Chair.
I'll second.
Do we have any other nominations? Okay, having received all nominations, the slate for vice chairperson includes Ken Rice. So the recording secretary will now poll the commission on their vote for the office of vice chairperson.
Vote passes unanimously.
And congratulations, Commissioner Rice. You're now the vice chairperson for 2023. And since you're in the proper seats, you're no need to move around. Thank you all.
Thank you. May I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve.
In a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion was made by Commissioner Mann and a second by Commissioner Mayer. Unless there are any objections, the agenda stands approved. Approval of the minutes. We have, the minutes was sent to us for the meeting of November 23rd. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes on November 23rd, 2022.
May I have a second?
Second.
A motion was made by Vice Chair Rice and a second by Commissioner Mann. Unless there are any objections, the minutes are approved. Declaration of conflict. The secretary will read the declaration of conflict.
If any member of the Planning Commission may have a conflict of interest or any reason why that member must abstain from consideration of any matter on this agenda, he or she should so declare at this time.
Are there any declarations of conflict? Hearing none, we will proceed. This is the time allotted for public statements or comments on all items other than public hearing items. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to be heard? Correspondence. Is there any correspondence from the Deputy Director, City Planner?
Yes, Chairman Tolson, we have one supplemental agenda item for item 13A1. It's a supplement to the report for the proposed 10,000 square foot industrial building. The supplement is the neighborhood council meeting minutes.
Perfect. We all had those, received those. Fantastic. The consent calendar, we have approval of the Mobile Home Rent Mediation Board Annual Status Report. Is there a report to be given or just to vote on it?
Yeah, this is a consent item. If you would have any questions, we could pull it off consent.
I do have a question, but it was more of a general question on how we can get more involved with, if we wanted to, with any of those tree advisory and mobile home rent mediation board.
So right now, we're talking about the report,
Okay,
and then later we can talk about
perfect,
the two
thank you.
groups in general. Any items or questions on the report as submitted to us? So we need to vote on that? Okay. So can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar item, which is this board annual status report? Motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Beautiful. A motion was made by Commissioner Mann and a second by Commissioner Kennedy. Unless there are any objections, motion stands approved. Okay. Now we're on to new business. This is the time and place set for a public hearing on consideration of PD-S-1073, a request to construct a 10,133 square foot industrial building, and the determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Are there any ex parte communications to report? May we have an oral report on this matter by staff?
Good evening, Chairman Tolson, members of the Planning Commission. Yes, this is a proposed industrial building on First Street, just north of the railroad tracks. Our senior planner, Narn Gunasekar, is here for the presentation. Narn?
Good evening. The applicant, Robert Freeman, requests approval of a planned development permit to construct a 10,133 square foot industrial building on a vacant 1 acre lot, along with the determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. The project site is shown here at 2240 First Street. The site is on the east side of First Street. Access to the site will be via a 30-foot private street on the north side of the lot. The private street also provides access to the existing RV storage facility that is located to the east via the existing easement. There are single-family residences to the north of the site with the Metrolink line to the south, and there's existing commercial buildings beyond that. You can see the site in these two photographs. The first photograph is looking south from First Street, and the second photograph is looking south from the private street that was mentioned previously. The site is currently vacant. The project layout is shown here. The majority of the parking will be adjacent to the north side of the building, next to the private street. Additional parking will be located in the rear of the lot on the east side. The loading area for the project will be located at the back of the building on the east side, as shown here. The site will have the required minimum 10-foot landscape buffer along the street frontage, and the same required minimum landscape buffer adjacent to the residential properties to the north, with the exception where there is an existing access easement to the north shown here. The building will consist of 2 units as shown on the floor plan here. The office portions of the building, highlighted in red, will be oriented along First Street, with the warehouse spaces highlighted in blue behind them. The single-story building will range from 15 feet to 38 feet in height. There will be a metal trellis cover along the northernmost office portion, which will be 15 feet tall and painted Sherwin-Williams Black Fox. The office portion of the building will be behind this and will be finished with stucco painted with Sherwin-Williams dovetail and with storefront glazing, as shown. The warehouse portion of the building is set back approximately 55 feet from the property line and will be 33 feet high, with a maximum of 38 feet to accommodate the internal stairway access to the roof in this one area. One portion of the building will be painted Sherwin-Williams dovetail, while the rest of it will be painted Sherwin-Williams napery. Each unit will have an 18-foot by 15-foot roll-up door at the back. The side elevations for the building incorporates windows along the building, as shown here in the partial north elevation. Rooftop equipment will be on the warehouse portion of the building, which will incorporate a 5-foot tall parapet wall for screening. It is staff's opinion that the proposed color scheme could use an additional trim color to define the building facade and to assist the proposed elevations to meet the city's design guidelines. Condition star A-15 has been added to the project approval conditions to require the applicant to submit revised elevation plans that incorporate this requirement as part of the building permit approval process. As shown in the table and detailed on page 8 of the staff report, the proposed project meets the setbacks, height requirements, off-street parking requirements, and other requirements of the development code. The project meets all the requirements of an infill development and qualifies for a Class 32 CEQA exemption as detailed in the staff report. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve Plan Development Permit PD-S-1073 to construct a 10,133 square foot industrial building on a 1 acre lot. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, folks, questions of staff? Put your name in the queue and we'll line you up. Commissioner Mayer, you want to go first?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Naren. I did have the opportunity to talk to you before about this in emails, so I just wanted to bring up a couple of things that, in me talking to the residents, were a concern to them. One of the concerns that you mentioned that is an exempt from is a noise concern, and a couple of residents say that they actually appreciate that building in the future because it will block some of the road noise. However, my concern and some of their concerns is that there will be loading and offloading and deliveries at any time because right now there's no restriction in the time of deliveries. And because it is light industrial, it could be at any time, day and night. And if that was my question, if we can impose some limitations or if that's something to be discussed in the future, because right now we don't know what kind of a business they're going to be putting in there. And I did ask that question too, and they don't know. So it could be building that is going to be sold or leased, but right now we don't know what kind of a business. And with deliveries 24/7, I feel like there is a concern that the residents are going to get tired. Them living next to the railroad doesn't mean that they need additional noise. So my concern is their quality of life there. So if we could just have like some restriction on the hours or discuss that. And another thing that the residents have as a concern is parking spaces that are going to be there and not in any way gated. So they don't want to have the situation where at night young adults or anybody can gather there and use it as a party space. So maybe we can restrict parking hours there too, so that they have the resource to call the police and the police can take action on that. So those are my questions, and I do want to thank staff, and I do appreciate additional business coming or opening jobs in our town.
So the question to staff then is there any restrictions now on what the delivery times would be once it's built in place?
There are currently no restrictions.
And then we're going to ask the applicant if we need to, but is there any discussion about a gate for?
There is an easement, so I'm not sure how a gate would work with that easement because the property behind takes access as well. So we have not had that discussion.
Okay.
And I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. Per code, when you add a gate, usually there's required setback from the street so trucks don't block the entryway. And there's often turnaround requirements or secondary access requirements. So adding a gate in this design might be complicated.
But they could put like restrictions on parking during the night, right?
They could, and there's also signage that could allow for police to tow away if they have the proper signage.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Commissioner Kennedy, I'm reading your mind.
I forgot how to push the button. Yes, request to speak. Yeah, just real quick, having occupied a similar structure here at CME for about 10 years, I knew that parking does become a problem as office space expands. So is there any restriction to the occupancy of the office space matching the parking spots for those facilities?
Currently, the parking spaces are calculated on a maximum of 15% of each unit being office space, and there is a condition that limits these buildings to 15% office space.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I've got one question about the flood zone. If I understand it correctly, the city council has approved some funds to take what I heard was most of the city out of the flood zone. Can we have someone from staff who might be an expert on that to address that?
That'll be Mr. Seamer.
Thank you, Mr. Seamer.
Thank you. Brent Seamer, Deputy Public Works Director. The topic you're talking about is probably a little off topic, but it is funding citywide. So it's probably a 3-year horizon to get started on it. So it's coming soon, and it would probably be promising for majority of the area as far as removing flood zone. However, if this project wants to move quicker, then the engineer has shown that they can provide FEMA with the application to show that the project could put fill in without affecting the neighbors. So that's their current approach. It's basically a brand-new thing for the city council to fund the new mapping. So a lot of projects hopefully won't wait, but if they do, there could be some advantage a few years down the line to not have to go through the expense on their own.
Bottom line is that, whether it's 3 years down the road, whoever's occupying it won't have to pay for flood insurance.
That's correct. And I'm a little off topic on that. Perhaps I could make a presentation about floodplain and all that.
Well, I would recommend it. I would recommend that you make such a presentation. If the planning commission wants to have that at a later discussion, have it properly agendized.
Okay.
I want to make sure that there's an attachment. So what you're saying is future occupancy might be able to get some financial break. And so there was a brief presentation on the city council action as it relates to the flood control issue.
On this property.
Yeah, on this property. So there's the connection, but I wouldn't go too much farther. That's my
Perfect.
recommendation.
Perfect. Okay.
The connection currently is they will be providing an application of FEMA. They must get it approved to actually remove the property from the flood zone before they start grading and constructing. So future property owners, residents will not be in a flood zone. They will not be in a mandatory requirement to obtain flood insurance if they had a federally backed loan on the property.
And this will affect the neighbors too, but appreciate the presentation on this property.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. The construction zone, over the next year or so after they start doing construction, the time for construction, so that to be mindful of the neighbors, is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.?
Correct. Per our noise ordinance, construction hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Sunday.
7 days a week. Okay, perfect. And then the lighting for the illumination on the parking, that's not going to be too bright, like if you were in front of Home Depot or something and the nighttime lights would be in my backyard or something.
Correct. So as one of the conditions for the approval is that they have to submit a photometric plan, and per the photometric plan, the light has to be a maximum of 0.5 lumens at the property line, and all their light fixtures have to be shielded and facing downwards.
Perfect. Shielded and facing downward. That's perfect. And in terms of signage, I'm thinking that because it's facing First Street, the west facing would be some signage there potentially, and then anything on the south side facing as you're driving up First Street. I used to be a retail owner, so signage was important to me.
Currently, so the signage is under a separate permit. There is a requirement for a master sign permit to be provided as a condition of approval. Currently, the applicant is only showing signage facing First Street and is not showing signage anywhere else. However, because signage is under separate permit, they may be able to come in and request additional signage.
Maybe depending on the type of applicant that takes over the place.
Potentially.
Yeah, okay. And then the 3 trees that are on the front line of those are going to be not moving. They're staying exactly where they are.
Correct. There are, I think, 3 trees on the eastern side that are being taken out that are not protected trees. They have to be taken out because that's where the parking, the driveway, all that goes. There are some trees that may need to be removed and replaced in the 10-foot landscape buffer to the north here, per their tree report. However, that will all be, that is a code requirement that they have those trees there. So that will be part of the final landscape approval process.
And just to confirm, there's no non-turf on that front 10-foot spot, or?
It's all ground cover, so not turf.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions for staff? If not, we will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Would the applicant like to present the project? We've got Billy Asay and Tony Asay.
Good evening. My name is Tony Ashai, and I'm here with Billy Ashai. I'm the architect on the project. And Billy's my son. He followed my footsteps. He went to USC and graduated with Masters in Architecture. I didn't want him to do it, but he did it on his own. First of all, I think Naren has done an amazing job working on this project with us. He's a great asset for the city, and he's done a great presentation. I really don't need to add anything else to this presentation, but I would like to answer a couple of questions that Commissioner Mayer raised. One of the question was the parking. I think it's a genuine concern because there are people that come at night and park and do party and drink. I know I have experienced it in the past. Because this is a private property, we could easily put a sign on it, private parking. And anybody else that parks that's not private, police can come in and evict them. So it's not on public land. So we don't really need to put restrictions on the approval that you can't park. I mean, if I own the building, I come at night, where am I going to park if you don't allow me? So it should be handled, I think, privately. I feel that is easy to do. Second thing is the noise from loading, unloading. I have done some projects and I've been close to industrial parks. I've never heard noise of loading and unloading. Unfortunately, a lot of times loading and unloading happens at night to these places. And we don't know who the tenant's going to be, what kind of business they're going to run. It could be a plumbing company or it could be auto parts. We have no idea. And I would suggest that we put that on the condition of approval for the business license rather than on the building. Because you can handle that very easily at the business when a type of business. I mean, if it was it could be a consultant, an engineer. He has no loading, unloading. Who could take this and a geotechnical engineer, So why would you put a restriction on him? So I would recommend that you put that restriction on the business owner rather than the landlord. This is my recommendation. Of course, you're free to do whatever you want. I would also answer any, and there was also some questions raised about lights. We have a tree buffer zone on the north side. As you can see, there are pretty large trees over there, the existing trees. I don't see any light from the building will go to those houses. I mean, I've stood at the site, I see that. Unless somebody cuts those trees and the lights are like really facing in that direction. If any light, they'll be facing down. And like Naren said, there is lumen requirement and restrictions on that, which we will follow. Any other questions you have? There was a question about the signage. Yes, I think there should be sign on the south side of the building because as you approach that, you will see that side. I mean, if I was renting it, I'd probably put the sign on the, more important is south side because on the front, you just pass by it and you don't even notice. So we would like that not taken away from us if a future tenant comes and he should have a right. Of course, he will, like Naren said, he would apply for signage permit and it'll be looked at what kind of sign, the size and everything else. We don't want any restriction that restricts them to put that sign. And I don't see anything else. It's a pretty straightforward building and I think it'll be a good addition to Simi Valley and that particular corner with the railroad tracks and everything else. If you have any questions, we will be glad to answer.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Mann.
I take it you're good with the city's recommendation to add a third color onto the building for a better definition?
Yes, we could do that. It's just a matter of what I understand. They just want some sort of a banding or something, a third color that will complement it. I mean, as an architect, I question it, but, city is city. Whatever they want, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
Any other questions? Neighborhood Council, one of the things that was asked was about solar. Is there any solar aspect to this project?
Yeah, if you, within our submittal, we had a roof plan that had actual space dedicated on the roof for solar panels. I mean, obviously, relative to the performance of the solar panels that are going to be specified, that would take up a certain amount of space, but we have space dedicated for the solar panels. So that's frankly a moot point in my opinion.
Also, can I add that the new building code requires you to have a certain amount of solar on the roof. So what we have done is dedicated areas for it, and if the landlord wants to, and if the city wants, enforce that by the building code, we will have to put solar panels on it. I wasn't in the neighborhood meeting, so I don't know what their concern was.
That was, the extent of it was that they asked if there was any solar component.
Yes, there will be.
In short, we are accommodating for it, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to be heard on this matter? I've got one card. If any other additional cards, please turn those in now. I have got Maureen Nichols. If you want to come up, we have 3 minutes. We'll start with 3 and see if we need more.
My daughter lives at 1140 Agnew, and she's the third house in from the street on First Street. So I have a question for you. What neighbors did you speak to about this easement or anything? You said that you had spoken to neighbors.
So this is the public testimony. This is where you speak. It's not like an interaction, unfortunately.
Okay.
But you can ask the question, and then maybe later it might be answered.
Okay, thanks. So my question is that the 3 neighbors that are on the corner, which is the gentleman here, and then my daughter's next door neighbor and themselves, no one's approached them in any way, asking them anything about the construction of the building or anything about it. And so that's a concern. Confirming the hours of construction, 7 to 7 is usually pretty late and early in the day for that kind of stuff. My daughter has 2 small children, and the train is noisy enough, let alone the construction of the building itself. The easement that you were talking about, the building, I don't think you see it in that way, but she's the third house in, and there's really no easement there. That's private street is there, and you're talking about trees and such. Not really aware of where those trees are either. The project is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act. I was just wondering if someone could explain that to see why they're exempt from that act. And when the businesses eventually come in, is that something that you have a hearing about that and the businesses that are there, or they just get approved to be there and nothing can be said about that? My concern is for quality of air and noise and everything else in that concern. Does that make sense? Okay. And then just as a question, has any of you been on site to see where that is and where the street is and the easement to that? Okay. I know at one time that the neighbors had said that when there is a car dealer across the street from where they live, and at one time they tried to take all of the 6 properties on that street and to make another car dealer. And so it has left a bad taste in the folks that have been there for a long time. She's only been there for a few years, but those folks are, rightfully so, thinking that people can just come in and just take your land. So it really brings sadness to the community in that shape.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a card from Otis Tire.
Yeah, I just got a couple questions. Like as far as the lighting goes, how tall is the lighting? And like the gentleman was talking, there's trees, but Edison has either 10 or 20 foot limit from the trees growing to the lines where they come out periodically and trail them back. Are the lights going to be above that? And as far as the operating hours of construction, my mother's 81, And 7 o'clock's way too early for that kind of noise. And as far as the easement there goes, that's our easement. And the retaining wall that's behind those trees is 1 foot inside our property line. The easement is ours. And we also have the express easement going out to First Street plus 50 feet into the RV storage. So as far as parking goes, how far is the parking going to be intruded in there? And then you guys were talking earlier about limiting parking hours to possibly a gate. If a gate's going to be there, how are we going to have access to our property? Unless you guys put a code gate in there and we have the code so we can get in there and access that property. Is our pavers going to be damaged during construction? And if they are, who's going to pay for them? And as far as, I don't know, I guess you guys don't even know what kind of companies are going to be established in there yet. If it's going to be a place that's going to be making some noise throughout the night, we're going to kind of have an objection to that. Depends on what the decibel level is. The trains we've been used to for 57 years, we've been used to them trains, so we're used to it. But I'm just worried. My mother would have been here, but she shattered her shoulder a couple weeks ago, so I know she's worried about the express easement, because I know as far as curbing and stuff like that goes, they got to verify it with us first, as far as I know. The pavers and access and the lighting and the noise level at night. And the construction time zones is basically what we're all worried about right now. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. Were there any other individuals who wanted to speak on this matter? We have a card to fill out. Otherwise, we're good. Are there any comments from staff regarding statements made during the public hearing? This is where many of your questions might be addressed.
Thank you, Chairperson. In regards to the lighting, it is going to have to follow the code requirements. Like Nara mentioned earlier, it has to meet a certain lumen requirements when you are next to the property. Our code requires for parking lot lighting that is adjacent to residential to be limited to 14 feet, within 100 feet of residential to be limited to 14 feet high. So it's not going to be taller than what the concerns are over here about being taller lighting. Also, I wanted to mention that there are existing lights right now on the site. So I don't believe there will be much of a difference, but we're definitely going to check that when we get the photometrics for the project. The question regarding the easement, that's an existing easement. And would you mind putting this one up? The easement we're talking about, that private street, it just gives access to the property and also to the RV storage in the back. It does not give access to the residential. Yes.
There are two easements on this property. One is this, sorry, I'm just trying to get the mouse to work. One is this private street that gives access to the RV storage on the east side. There is also another easement that sort of terminates in this area that gives access to and from the property to the north. I think the concern that was raised was whether there would be any parking or anything like that within the easement. There is no parking or anything within that easement. There was parking within the easement to the RV storage, and as detailed in the staff report, we made the applicant go back and get those easements revised. I think another question that the member of the public had was with regard to construction in the easement and things like that. The easement specifies what can be done with regard to, if it's for access, then they are going to be able to construct the road for access. They won't be able to put a building in the middle of it because obviously they have to have that easement for access. Generally, the specifics of damage, things like that, is a private party concern. So I would let the applicant maybe address that, but that's what I just want to clarify the easement issue.
Thank you, Naren.
And with regard to, I think there was a question also about the Class 32 exemption, the CEQA exemption. So the California Environmental Quality Act provides exemptions for certain types of projects as long as they meet certain requirements, and this is detailed in the staff report. I'm just going to quickly go through those. The project is consistent with the applicable general plan designation, applicable zoning designations and regulations. The development is within city limits on a project site that is no more than 5 acres in size, substantially surrounded by urban uses. Project site has no value as habitat for endangered, rare, threatened species. There would be no... There would be no, the approval of the project would not result in any significant effects relating to traffic, noise, air quality, or water quality, and the site can be adequately served by all required utilities and public services. So it meets all the requirements of the Class 32 exemption.
In regards to the potential noise created by the loading zone, again, we don't know what type of business is going to be in there, but right now the code does not have any restrictions. The commission could also decide to impose a condition on that if that's the case. However, when it comes to noise levels, usually the ambient noise is what's going to have, more the effect, but in reality, it's just going to be the building, the industrial building is so small that you're not going to get the big semi trucks. I don't believe so, but nevertheless, that's something that could be mentioned.
Can I add to that? There's also 75 feet between this line and the property line, and there is a 6-foot-tall block wall along the property line as well, in addition to the landscape in terms of noise concerns, which you obviously understand. And I think one member of the public had a question about businesses, what businesses will go in there, and whether those will be subject to a public hearing. We have a table in the code that gives you businesses some businesses would be permitted uses, and those have been deemed not to potentially have impacts on surrounding properties. There are also what are called conditional uses. Those conditional uses may have impacts and would require a conditional use permit, at which stage there would be a public hearing, and at which stage the public would be noticed and they would be able to express their concerns. And I think that's it from staff. Oh, and sorry, one more. Construction hours, those are, it's a noise ordinance that basically dictates that. We don't really have much control over that, as far as I know.
And to further clarify with what our staff has said so far, I'll just point out a couple of things. Light poles beyond 100 feet from the residential zone may go up to 20 feet in height. So there may be two different heights of light poles, but the 14-foot light pole height is within 100 feet of the residential property. And again, what Naren was mentioning, there's permitted uses and conditional uses. A permitted use may be something that's completely within the building, maybe such as a engineering office of some sort versus a light industrial type use that may be a welder or a mechanic of some sort, which may have potential noise impacts. So it triggers the public hearing to ensure that the proposed use is in the best location and has the proper mitigation measures. And we would notify property owners within 300 feet of that use. So potentially, depending on the use, another hearing may occur. Other uses, obviously, this would be it. And just to also clarify something the applicant mentioned, we cannot condition a zoning clearance or a business tax certificate to regulate that, particularly hours of operation or loading zone restrictions. That is something that still could be conditioned with this item tonight if so desired.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to respond to any of the comments regarding statements made during the public hearing?
There was, what was the concern? So I can, yeah.
So yeah, regarding the concerns, there were things related to hours of construction. The hours of construction can be altered to accommodate for a later starting time or an earlier ending time, but that would affect the general timeline of construction. So typical construction for a building is 18 to 24 months. So if the hours of operation are not 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., that could extend, and they're shortened per day, it could extend the timeline.
You could put a condition. I've seen some people put conditions like on the weekend and things like that, not allowed Saturday, Sunday. I don't know how you do it in this city, but because of the neighbors, you could put a condition like that, and that would be perfectly fine with us. What was the other one?
There were issues regarding lighting height.
Yeah, well, I think they already addressed the lighting height, 14 feet and higher than 14 feet if it goes away more than 100 feet.
Yeah, and then there were things regarding operating hours of construction.
Yeah. So if you guys have any question, we'll answer. If Naren has any question, because I didn't take notes.
Naren pretty much answered
Answered
everything,
all-
even
all-
regarding the easement issues and
Yeah.
even there was a mention of property access in relation to the proposal of a gate. to
No,
protect-
we can't put a
Yeah,
gate.
our intention is
It's
not to.
impossible to put a gate on a property. Have double gates, there's a gate at the back, and then put another gate in the front and it is a private property. Oh, there was a question about damage. I think one gentleman talked about damage to the easement. I think that's handled between the two property owners. And also when you do construction, you put up a bond or something like that in most cities that if there's any damage to public right of way and things like that, that will be fixed and cured before the job is done, brought back to its original shape. I don't know if there is something like that for private. You can put that in, but we will accept a condition that says if the easement access was damaged, it needs to be brought back to its original shape by this particular builder or the owner. That would be fine, and that's fair and reasonable. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's no other further questions, we will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Are there any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission? Commissioner Mann. Oh, Commissioner Mayer.
Oh, it's me, not you. So I just wanted to reply because I'm sorry I didn't write down your name, but you asked me who I talked to, and I didn't seek out, I didn't knock on doors, I did go and check the site. And a couple of people reached out to me, and that's who I talked to. I did not talk to you or your daughter, but I encourage you to always reach out and with your concerns up front, either to us or the city council or whoever. Thank you.
Commissioner Rice, or Vice Chair Rice.
A few things. First, I don't know that I think that I appreciate that the applicant is willing for the easement condition. I think that that's great. I appreciate that the applicant's also willing to agree to a condition for not doing construction on the weekends, but I don't know that that necessarily needs to be a condition, but I think that it would definitely help the neighbors if the applicant would at least try, you know, when possible, not to do it on the weekends. I think that the neighbors would definitely appreciate it. I know that, you know, when you're doing construction, sometimes you got to work on Saturdays or you got to work on Sundays, but when you don't do it on those days, I'm sure the neighbors would really appreciate it. As somebody who lives next to a place kind of like this, I do sometimes hear people, you know, banging away on things at times when they're not supposed to, and I understand. But generally speaking, when it gets to be at a certain point of night, that's a definitely unusual thing, and I hear the train too, and it's farther than it will be for this project, but still, that's kind of a rare thing. The lighting, the city lighting standards are pretty strict. They really are. And going by some of the projects that we've approved in the last 6 or 8 years, the lighting standards are pretty strict. A lot stricter than what they are that you see across the street there. So that's not really a concern. The CEQA guidelines that we have to follow, the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines that come from the state are very strict as well, and we have to meet those guidelines. The buffer, which is 69 feet to the north, that is a big buffer to the building. The applicant's landscape architect I personally think is kind of amazing, because normally when we look at landscape plans, usually the plants we see are the plants as they would look 25 years from now, which is completely ridiculous because we'd never see plants like that anyway. This landscape architect has shown us plants as they would look in 3 years, which is probably much more realistic. And the landscape architect actually chose a really nice palette of plants, a lot of different colors, which is unusual. So kudos to you, sir, for choosing a good landscape architect. It actually looks very nice, and I hope it looks half as good as it looks there. I appreciate that. I think this, at first glance, this project does look kind of blah. The colors don't just run out and grab you or anything else. But, when you start to put the whole project together, maybe that's not such a bad thing, because you're going to drive right by and not see it. And I keep thinking about the people who live on First Street and on, what is it, Agate? I believe
Agnew.
Okay, Agnew. I keep thinking about the people living on that street and in their backyard, and you might not necessarily, it's not something that's going to reach out and grab you in the backyard, because it's not going to be some garish, orange color or some crazy thing like that. In that sense, I'm glad it's not some, bright, bold color or something. So in that sense, I think it's good. There's nothing in here that stands out, nothing that grabs me nothing that I think violates any of the city codes, nothing that violates the state codes. I think that Mr. Gunasekera has done a good job of keeping the applicant on point, and I don't see anything with this project that would lead me to really push the applicant or lead me to deny the applicant. But I do agree that maybe that easement condition should be put in there. So I would be, at the moment at least, unless there's something that one of the other commissioners points out, I'd be in favor of approving this project.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Kennedy?
Yeah, Commissioner Rice really touched on all the same items I have on my list, except for one, and that's the future tenants of this building and the quality aspects around that. Obviously, that's not why we're here tonight, but I know that will come back as the tenants apply for their business permits for this property. And having been one of those applicants in the past here in the city, I understand the process you go through. So you will probably get a very, very good conforming tenant there in today's business environment. We will look at that.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Mann?
The easement on the north side, is that an obsolete easement, or does that actually benefit somebody or something?
That benefits the property to the north. So there's,
So that easement will remain in place?
yes.
And so when we heard about pavers, those are the pavers that he's addressing. There's, I guess, pavers on that part of the easement?
Yes, it's like this, it might not be that visible, but it's this open space here in the
Right.
landscaping.
I looked at it on Google Maps while I was up here.
Yeah.
So it benefits that one property?
Yes.
Okay. On restrictions for parking and whatnot, didn't we do that on like the Zeebeck building on Tapple Canyon, that we restricted trucks running or deliveries or something? So I think we have something that we can
Yes, but that
restrict.
was because those trucks were going down a residential street when they left the property.
Got it, okay. Canyon easement. That's it for me, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see here. As it relates to Commissioner Kennedy, he mentioned that any tenant would be coming back to the public for approval. That Mr. Gibson clarified that certain things won't have to. If it's a conditional use permit needed, then it will be subject to the public notifications. I like the staff's recommendation on the additional color of the trim. I brought up the lighting because I want to make sure that the neighbors know that it's being addressed and taken care of. I brought up the construction hours so that everyone would know that this is what the expectation is, and we'd hope that a neighbor would be a good neighbor by saying what Vice Chair Rice would be, skip the weekends if possible. I like the fact that the utilities are underground. The trees that are out there now are Brisbane boxes, and for me, they're a little busy. I would have liked to have something less, but let's keep the trees where they are. Yeah, like I said, if I, as a business owner on that thing, you want to trim them as much as you can and get away with whatever you can. But aside from that, I think we've addressed all the conditions or questions that the public or neighbors have had. And I think the lighting and the delivery times are concerned, and hopefully, it won't be too bad. But I'm in favor of this project. Nobody else? May I please have a reading of the resolution?
Resolution number SVPC 02-2023. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley approving plan development permit for PDS 1073. A request to construct a 10,133 square foot industrial building on a vacant 1 acre lot located at 2240 First Street, and a determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
The chair will now entertain a motion.
I move to adopt a resolution approving PDS 1073 and a determination as condition, and a determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
So you're talking about as presently conditioned with,
Presently conditioned
with,
and with
Easement?
his easement.
I've had a chance to put some thought into it. I would be a little loath to interfere with third-party easements. I think condition,
Leave the easement out.
I would-
Stick with A15 that.
right, I would recommend that, and condition A4 does require during the lifetime of the permit that the applicant must comply with all applicable laws and regulations of every local, state, and federal entity. And so within those laws, I suspect there might be property laws, and so if there is subsequent litigation between the parties, private matters will have to hash it out themselves.
I would be A15 and
A4.
A4. Okay, so as conditioned with A15 and A4 then.
I believe that's A13, the
Okay,
maintenance
so
condition.
A13. Okay. So I move to adopt a resolution approving PDS 1073 and as conditioned, and a determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
A motion was made by Vice Chair Rice. May I have a second?
Second.
Call for the vote. Commissioner Kennedy, are you locked in?
Motion passes unanimously.
The appeal period for the plan development permit is 14 calendar days. And oral communications and report. Does the staff have anything to report?
Yes, Chairman Tolson. I did email all 5 of the commissioners polling for their interest in attending the Planning Commissioners Training in Santa Barbara on February 17th. I've heard back from 3 of you. If the other 2 would like to reach out to me, I could get everyone signed up for that. And also the League of California Cities conference coming up in March. The city has travel and conference funds for 1, maybe 2 commissioners to attend that. That's the one at the end of March that I mentioned at the last meeting. If you are interested, let me know. I'll do a follow-up emails for that as well.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have anything to report or discuss? Commissioner Mayer.
Yeah, so I would like to learn more on how we can participate in the tree advisory and mobile home boards. Thank you.
Duly noted. Anybody else?
Since the planning commissioner has brought it up, the tree advisory board question, I would like to follow up on that as well. Tree advisory board issue here is that when it comes to street trees, I'd like to have the city provide the planning commission with the process for how a citizen gets a street tree, and also a presentation, on the value of street trees and what actually the board does as far as the tree advisory board is concerned.
We can come back with a report on that.
That would be fantastic. I have a few other things, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. Also, I didn't see it, but in our city code, I don't see any guidelines for electric charging stations. And since 20% of new cars sold are electric, I don't know if we have any guidelines for charging stations.
There is a charging code section in zoning and the building code
Is it in the building code?
for expedited processing and some limited design standards.
Okay.
Are those that are publicly available or private charging stations? So it'd be publicly or city properties, or?
I'd have to read it further. It's more of a building code.
Okay. Also, too, previously we had a presentation on coyote fencing in Indian Hills, and we sent it away without making a decision, and I was wondering if we were ever going to get a follow-up on that.
We put it on the back burner, Vice Chair Rice, but it's still on the docket.
Okay.
We haven't had too many other inquiries other than from the Planning Commission, so it certainly could come
all right.
back.
Just curious. And then the final thing was this. I know that there's some new laws that Sacramento has graced us with, and I was just wondering if we'd get any sort of maybe any kind of, like how those things might affect us here on the Planning Commission. Maybe some sort of short presentation on how those things might have an effect on us at some point.
Understood. We will.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything really big, but, just.
We have a few items coming up on the docket regarding ADUs. In fact, that may be a scheduled public hearing for an ADU amendment. We are working on correspondence regarding some of the updates in housing laws. We're kind of piggybacking on some council requests as well. So we'll be sure to forward something to the Planning Commission.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
I was assuming you were talking about specifically housing laws.
Yes, as they apply to the Planning Commission.
Beautiful. Just as this project came through, I had some concerns about the size of the storage for the dumpsters. In as much as we have a new laws that say you've got to also store your, organics. And so I sent some information to our Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Gibson, about what some guidelines are. We may have to look at that in terms of expanding those sizes of the containers.
Yeah, we actually brought that up with the project on Tapo Street with the apartment complex there. That is the first time that I think we brought that up. But
Yep.
but yeah, so that's another issue that needs to be brought up at some point. So
Okay. Anything else, folks? Mobile Home Rent Mediation Board, does the staff have anything to report?
No additional items.
Tree Advisory Board, does staff have anything to report?
Just that we'll come back with a response to your concerns tonight.
Beautiful. This concludes the meeting of January 18th. The next scheduled meeting will be February 8th. This meeting is adjourned.